Box office top 10. First of all, at Numero Babysham 1974. Y2K. So Ian M. Finchley. I enjoyed myself rather a lot. It's not amazing, but this mid-30s millennial got plenty of laughs from the late 90s, early 2000 references, and even enjoyed Fred Durst's appearance. I'm willing to accept that film festivals often slant positive because of the whole experience.
Yeah.
The cast showed up for Q&A, including a very inebriated Durst. But my similarly aged pal watched it a few days ago here in the UK and came away with an even more glowing review than me. Really good fun and a great soundtrack. That's what he said. That being said, I know my particular age bracket seems to be skewing much more positive than most on the film, and the fact that A24 held it back for over a year from premiere to UK release clearly means they weren't particularly confident in it. Still, a few of us had fun, so it's not quite the universal stinker that marks think it is. Toodle pip.
Okay.
Up and down with the usual Ian and Finchley. David in Nottingham. Dear 31st of December and the 1st of January, greetings from NHS Nook, long-time listener, multiple emailer. There is an old adage, you never get the credit for the disaster that you stopped happening. Is this a reference to the movie? Yes, it is. I get that. Okay,
yeah.
Here we go.
Yes,
the Millennium.
It's the bug, and everyone's. Yeah.
That's right, the Millennium Bug. So David says the Millennium Bug was very real. It could have had enormous, serious problems. I mean, not being eaten by Tamagotchis, but it would have been unpleasant. And these problems were averted and fixed by an incredible effort by a stack of people who probably weren't paid very well for it. The next problem's along in 2038. Please look up year 2038 problem, why 2038, or the apocalypse, as in epoch ellipse. So here's to those who will end up fixing that one for the very little celebration. So I looked this up.
Okay.
The year 2038 is a problem because apparently some computer systems are unable to represent times after the 14th of March. The 19th of January 2038. It's to do with something called Unix time, a way of keeping time digitally. And once you go beyond a certain moment on the 19th of January 2038, then everything is going to explode.
Wow.
Not that, but apparently, and I was looking it up. There's a paragraph which starts, "There is no solution." So
Yikes.
I'm just saying that my guess is we'll get to 2038, and as David in Nottingham correctly says, someone will have fixed it. They won't have been paid very much money, and we'll move on to 2039.
But David is absolutely right that the reason that Y2K didn't make hospitals fail and planes fall out of the sky is because people worked really hard to avert it. And then, of course, as is the kind of the collective idiot mind, everyone went, "Well, it didn't happen, did it?" You go, yeah, no, that's sort of the point. But the thing is, Y2K is still a terrible film.
Number 10, Captain America: Brave New World. No, thank you.
Yeah,
Number 9.
If you haven't seen it in a cinema, don't worry. The American Defense Department will just text it to your phone, so it's fine.
Okay, that's a very useful thing. Thanks for doing that. Dogman is at number 9.
Still laughing at the Dogman and the walking buildings. Sorry.
Number 8 is Marching Powder. Number 7 is The Alto Knights. Now, that seems to me a little bit of a low entry, does it not?
Yes, it is. It's performed poorly. The trade presses have been filled with stories about just how poorly it has done. The main criticism, which everyone seems to have, which I raised in my review, but I certainly wasn't alone in it, is why is Robert De Niro playing two roles? Why didn't they just have two actors doing it? Somebody said to me that they thought, and I thought this was very astute, they said that they thought that the reason he was playing two roles was to keep him interested. And I think that's right. It's not to keep us interested. It was to keep him interested.
Okay.
Because otherwise it is just a seen it all before gangster story.
This email, which is signed "Best wishes to both of you" from Anonymous. When I was watching The Alto Knights, I didn't think of any Martin Scorsese films, but one film floated to my mind, and that is Once Upon a Time in America. Not only is the theme extraordinarily similar, but also both star Robert De Niro. However, The Alto Knights lack the charisma and the intrigue that made Once Upon a Time in America enjoyable.
And
I was wondering if they chose Robert De Niro to be in both the protagonist role and antagonist role, because they want to emphasize the message that even though they grew up together and had the same environment, their values and the view of the world are drastically different. Regardless, I found the first part of the film extremely boring. The second half was okay, but overall, mediocre.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it whilst it was on, and then the minute it was gone, and I don't think I'll think about it again. And it, as I said, it's very, very soft opening, and it will probably be out of the charts in a couple of weeks.
A new entry at number 6, which will be around a lot longer, I suspect, and that is Flow.
Well, both you and I loved this. As I said, I just recently interviewed Michael David, who made The Red Turtle, something else I was doing, and we were talking about the way in which Flow, like The Red Turtle, tells its story without words. It's a kind of universal language of cinema, and making history at the Oscars. It's just lovely. It is a film for children of all ages, and I include a 62-year-old man in that. You loved it too, right?
Yeah, I did. I'm just looking up a word to see if I can work out what the language is, because I think we've had. It's Latvian, isn't it?
Latvian, yes. Yeah.
I think we've had our first email in Latvian.
Oh, fantastic!
It comes from Ilona Skuja. There's a bunch of Latvian, and then I imagine a Google Translate, which says, on the weekly film podcast yesterday, British critics also talked about Flow, of course with good reviews, a very popular and cool show about cinema. They also recognised it as the best of the films reviewed on this week's show. Okay, so that's like an extract from a conversation somewhere in Latvia, I imagine.
Lovely.
Thank you, Ilona. Matt from Bristol, Daphne from Los Angeles, and Maria from Kyiv. Dear doctors, we made an emergency trip to the cinema on Friday to see Flow after hearing both of your thoughts on the show, and it was well worth the visit. On our way home, our little group reflected on just how global it is. We could not think of another film that could be shown, unedited, to a room of people of any age and in any part of the world, and have it be universally understood by all of them. At a time where the world is feeling increasingly disconnected and full of hostile differences, this was a little comfort for some uncommon ground. And the fact that Matt then signs it, he says, up with bridges and down with walls, but the fact that he's in Bristol, Daphne's in Los Angeles, Amir in Kyiv, sounds like an extraordinary group of people anyway, but they make a profound point, I think.
Yes, and I think, again, this is a profound point about non-verbal cinema, silent cinema, as it's generally called, which of course isn't silent. But I say this every time because Mike Figgis told it to me and it really stuck with me. When immigrants arrived at Ellis Island, during the Great Wave, they were shown a silent film of life in New York in order to introduce them to this new world that they were entering. And Figgis said, and then sound came along, and suddenly film became national rather than international, because the international part of cinema is silent cinema.
So go see Flow if you get a chance. And obviously, people might think, well, we're adults. Why would we go and see an animation? Well, you need to trust us on this.
Yes,
I think
you do.
Mickey 17 is at number 5.
It had a good run at the top, and I liked it. I'm surprised by how well it's been received, because if you remember when I reviewed it, I said, well, I like it very much, but it's very Bong Joon-ho in as much as it's very, sorry, which genre are we in? And I think it's done pretty well, and that's kind of encouraging. I think some people who were going expecting Parasite may be surprised, but anyone who's seen The Host or Okja will know that this is a very Bong film.
Black Bag is at number 4.
It's kind of an intriguing, exciting, essentially foolish but fun espionage thriller with some great performances, almost like a sort of like a chamber play or something that just happens to be about international espionage, and good performances.
Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boys at number 3.
I laughed, I cried, I thought it was a mess, but I didn't care.
Number 2, is it? Do I pronounce this Neja 2?
Yes. So this wasn't national press screened, although some critics have been to see it and have done reviews of it since then. It is Chinese animated fantasy that has broken box office records inside and outside of China. Highest grossing animated film and highest grossing non-English language film in its domestic market. And first animated film in history to hit the 2 billion mark. So I will go and see it this weekend in Cornwall, and I'll have a review next week. Have we had any emails about it?
We have not, no, but maybe we'll have for next week. If you see Neja to
sure.
correspondence at kermodeandmayo.com. We have had correspondence about the number one movie here and the number one movie in America, which is Disney's Snow White. Why don't I do a roundup of all of them, and then
go ahead.
Then you come in. Maria Friel, Disney really need to stop doing this. Every iteration has just been a pointless attempt to churn money out of familiar properties and rewrite past cultural insensitivities. I honestly think the true test of all these films is who is going to watch these over the original animated classics? Also, the point at the end about the intended audience. What happened to films aimed at 9, 10 and 11-year-olds, which adults could also genuinely and thoroughly enjoy? Arkham Knight says, when you're bringing in modern day sensibilities and politics into a fairy tale, of course, you're going to be able to tell a miserable story and make a horrible film. You're shooting yourself in the foot. It is a fairy tale. None of this is real. Folklore dwarves don't exist. Magic apples don't exist. Magical mirrors don't exist. Princes barely exist. Of course, films have become more terrible and miserable because people can no longer separate the two things. We are left with make-believe in misery. It's no longer escapism. There's more on a similar vein. Greg in Oxfordshire. I just came out of seeing Disney's Snow White with my 6-year-old and loved it. Whilst Mark is right about the new songs not being a patch on the old classics, the story was heartfelt and fun. My 6-year-old fell about laughing at the dwarfs and he pretended to whistle all the way home. Whilst the cartoonishness entertains and throws back to the original nicely, the love story at the centre didn't feel contrived or forced, but was given the time to grow. Snow White standing up for what is right, a story of people power against the greedy oligarchy, felt connected to our time, and the central message of inner beauty over greed also landed well. Ignore the online abuse of people who make money criticising a film they haven't seen and go out and see it, says Greg in Oxfordshire. And regarding junior input, here is the voice of Eva Jones, aged 5. This is from Dr. Bob Mann in West Wellow, Hampshire. This is a voice file of Eva Jones, age 5, one of my 6.5 grandkids. Okay,
Fantastic.
Here's Eva's review.
Hello, Grandpa. This is me, Eva, obviously. I'm here to tell you what my review of Snow White would be. I don't know why the prince is not a prince like in the original movie. And there are some scary scenes that made me jump a bit. But the good things about it that I really liked was that it was really, really funny. And I loved the songs. That's why I'd give it a 4-star review.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much to Dr. Bob Mann for sending that in, and thanks to Eva Jones for sending that in, because it seems to me that that's exactly what these conversations haven't had. Inevitably, we're old guys. Eva is 8 years old, and this movie was made for her. Yeah. So anyway, there's a random bunch of selection of opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said last week, I knew somebody who had taken their kid to see a preview screening of it, and they said it was okay. They didn't love it, and they were at that point in their life when they were still quite new to cinema, and so every film they saw was the best film they'd ever seen. We were talking last week about the fact that the brand awareness is so big that the film, the film would still have legs because it is a Snow White film. I don't like it, but I equally don't like, and this is why we began last week with that very good email from somebody who was, au fait with the production. I think that the sort of culture war backlash against it being woke is the very worst of human behavior. And what we were trying to do was to review the film rather than that stuff. And I do think it is really important to distinguish. I didn't like it, and I thought there were things that didn't work about it. Although I like Rachel Zegler very much, and I think she nearly saves it, but not quite. But it is a perfect example of something which got completely drowned in this shrieking right-wing, anti-woke culture war nonsense. And I will say this: if you ever use the phrase woke to describe something in a derogatory or a disparaging manner, you are an idiot, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
So what we'd like, so thank you very much for all the emails on this. And it is quite interesting that Greg in Oxfordshire went with a 6-year-old, had a great time.
Yeah.
Eva, aged 8, had a good time. let's have more. And if you went and you didn't like it, then that's also fine. But at least
fine.
these are reviews from people who have seen the film.
Who are reviewing the film. And that is the point. Absolutely, that is the point. And I, at the risk of stating the obvious, that is what we try to do. There was loads of people online who said, well, this must be really terrible because even Mark Kermode, who's the most liberal lefty woke critic in the world, didn't like it. It's like, yeah, just crawl under a rock and do not come out.
Or go see the film and send us an informed review based on what you've actually seen rather than what you've actually heard. And if you still don't like it, then that's fine.
Fine.